There probably is truly going to be two legitimate things that could make gaming better. One of which is going to be more Q&A testing, and the other one is easily going to be more real open betas. In this video, I'm going to break down why I truly think this is, and I really think basically every single game can probably benefit from it. Now, the first thing I have to mention right off the bat here is I'm not saying every single game is going to be terrible in these two aspects, but we can probably all agree that most games nowadays do end up struggling in both of these departments. Now, I wouldn't say again that every game is struggling because some do obviously release really well. We could probably say Elden Ring. Most From Software games for that matter, Wukong was going to be a very solid launch. We also saw something like Grand Theft Auto coming out pretty solid even though the multiplayer back then wasn't. I'm going to guess and say right now that Grand Theft Auto 6 will have a very good launch to it. That is also going to come down to a lot of testing on their end. Again, I don't obviously think Grand Theft Auto probably have an open beta, but they're also going to have a ton of Q&A testers in that game, most likely testing it right now. So it is most likely going to make a lot of sense there. On the other side of that, though, I do feel like other games really do need more of this stuff before they end up coming out. One thing I've always liked, though, is in Battlefield back in the day, they had the CTE thing on it, which if you are wondering, that's going to be the community test environment. And being in there, you'd be able to test out new weapons, gadgets, also attachments on these said weapons. You'd be able to use new vehicles and stuff like that, mess around on the new maps, and really test stuff out before it truly actually came out in the actual DLC itself. Now, I do feel like a lot of players actually like this stuff because you're like, yo, this gadget's not working right, this weapon needs some balancing issues there. This vehicle's going to be insanely overpowered to be like, okay, let's take a look at that stuff before we do end up releasing it and it's actually going to be broken. Then they're actually going to have to take a month before they get out another patch to end up fixing the issue with that thing. And for me, that was probably like one of the biggest things I noticed in games. Like, I'm sure everybody has probably been in that situation before. You probably jump on a new game, you're playing it, you discover something, and you're like, yo, was there any testing going on this? Like, this should not actually be a thing. A lot of players have been saying that about Test Drive recently and other games that have come out. They're playing in, they're like, was any of this stuff tested out, bro? Like, how is this race not working? Why can't I use that weapon in the game or something? When I use this, it breaks it. When I go here, I'm going to crash the game out. Like, was some of this stuff not tested out, bro? I would probably say having a huge Q&A testing team in there just going over all of it and really making sure everything does actually work as intended. I feel like that's probably going to be the best way to have a healthier game come out and most likely not have a game come out with issues that probably weren't even noticed in development, or they probably didn't have enough testing on these said issues in that game to really find it, which we all do know is probably going to be fairly common nowadays. We all do know right now a lot of games obviously have to go through a ton of testing on it. I do understand the programming and the coding behind gaming is probably absolutely insane. But the thing is though, like, bring a lot more people in, bring in a lot of content creators, bring in gamers for that matter, and let them actually try out the game and let you know the issues they might end up finding. Like, if you actually had 100 people playing a game and testing it, and then brought in like another 500 players or something like that, I feel like those other 500 people might actually find another issue they might have not have found. Like, what if they did find another glitch that might have not been found from the other 100 that might have actually ended up coming out when the game did end up releasing? That is actually going to be an easy way to find a bug or be like, okay, that is a problem. We cannot have this race be glitching out and kicking everybody out of it. And who knows, maybe that person happened to join that race with like 2 or 3 other people, and boom, the game did end up crashing. They actually go back in, they join with one other person, it doesn't crash, but they end up joining it again with at least 3 people, and boom, the game crashes. At least now they're going to be like, okay, let's actually go down on this and fix it. That way it's not going to come out, then we have to go back in and fix it. The players aren't happy about it. And again, some of those issues can last months before they are actually repaired. Normally in a lot of games nowadays, I've noticed basically all of them are kind of following like a 2 to 3 month update thing for them. At least I have noticed it. And that's the thing though, if one of the updates actually come out introducing new content into the game itself, sometimes there's actually going to be a few bugs that do end up following with it. We all do know right now with most updates we've probably seen in gaming nowadays that, well, normally with every patch it's probably going to fix a bunch of stuff then add new issues to the game. And yes, it's probably going to be incredibly frustrating, but if we actually had something like the CTE thing from Battlefield, imagine how many things would actually get fixed. And this could actually be something for every single big update or even small update that a game does end up putting out. Put a bunch of players in there, let them test some of the this stuff out, and then boom, you might end up finding that the lobby crashes here. This car's going to be really overpowered. Yo, this weapon's kind of going to be a bit broken. We probably need to nerf it before it comes out or something. Or you're actually going to have a couple of broken cars that are going to be used for months on end because the update to actually fix them is going to be another 2 to 3 months away. I'm sure a lot of people are probably seeing where this entire cycle is going at this point. And yes, I have to agree, it is insanely frustrating. Now, one thing I was thinking about with this, though, is I do understand that not every game probably has something like a CTE, because obviously most games don't. I do understand sometimes before a big patch that you can actually get invited to stuff or play it. Now, I do understand you can't talk about these set updates and all that, but it is going to be a very small number actually on the game and playing it, so we gotta agree that, well, most likely many of the bugs that you might end up finding probably won't happen until a bigger amount of players are actually playing it. I'm not saying around 50 to 60 content creators, no. You're going to need thousands of players in there doing different stuff to see what issues or glitches might actually pop up. And the issue with that is normally that is not going to be a thing. Now, the other way to do this, though, that I did want to talk about, which is going to be the second way I think games can get better, that is going to be a lot more open betas and also, I guess you could say, playtests. That way the game is actually going to come out more complete. And this is the second thing I really do think can actually change gaming, at least for the better in basically every aspect. That is going to be having a lot more open betas in the actual game itself. We all do know a lot of games probably have closed betas nowadays, but here's the thing. Most of the time with a quote-unquote closed beta, you're probably going to have to pre-order the game or even a higher edition of it to even get into that said beta to even play the game. So I'm going to guess and say right off the bat that that's probably going to be a way smaller player base in there, unless it's probably going to be a really big like mainstream type of game like Call of Duty or something. Then yeah, it's probably going to have a lot of big lobbies and stuff in a closed beta. But most of the time in some of the games, if they actually want you to pre-order it before actually being able to even play the game, I feel like that's kind of a red flag though. Like if you're actually going to have to pre-order it, you played a bit, we all do know actually refunding a game on PlayStation can be a bit of a nightmare. So if you actually pre-order the game, you do end up playing that closed beta, you don't like it, you actually go to refund that game, sometimes it might be kind of annoying to do it. So why not actually have a bunch of open betas, that way a bunch of players can get on it, test it out, and that way they're actually going to find flaws in the servers with around, instead of having 10,000 people from a closed beta that pre-ordered it, you might actually be able to get 80 to 100,000 people, and guess what, a lot more issues are definitely going to be shown if you do something like this. You're actually probably going to find a lot more bugs or something on the server side of it, a lot more glitches, issues, and stuff that you would never find unless the game did end up coming out. And then boom, you're actually going to be finding new bugs because everybody's on the game when it releases. But if you actually had open betas before the fact, guess what? You would probably have fixes for that stuff before the game even releases. Now, as I did mention earlier, though, I'm not saying that every single game is going to be terrible in this aspect, because I would say some of them are actually pretty dang good. And in some aspects, a lot of games might not even have a said beta in them, because the actual Q&A testing was so dang solid. I would say something like that has been done for like Sekiro or Dark Souls or even something like Elden Ring. And I do understand they've had betas and stuff like that for games like those in the past, but a lot of the times if they actually have the proper Q&A testing in there, then boom, the game would still actually be solid instead of having to throw out 15 betas for it. Then again, I also feel like having a bunch of Q&A testing and the betas in there would not be a terrible idea. Now, on the other side of that, we can look at something like Solar Crown that had a bunch of playtesting on it, legit a year before the game actually came out, and an open beta, at least for PC anyway. For some odd reason on console, which is where most of the players would have been, they did not have an open beta on it. Does that make legitimately any sense? And then legit the one video they actually had around a month or so later for it, they were like, we were not expecting to have the issues or something like that with this amount of people. It's like, bro, what? Like, if you actually had the open betas in there and around 100,000 people got on it, as I mentioned earlier in the video, then who knows, maybe some of those issues that the servers were crashing a bit might have actually been way more resolved on day one. And that will also be the other thing I was thinking about though, like if these companies are going to be even slightly worried about these servers, at least for the day one release anyway, why not have something like an open beta, make a post about it? I have actually made a few other things about this in other videos because I feel like it's a pretty good idea to do it. You'd actually be like, yo, everyone come through, we're going to do a server test on it. I actually feel like most people are going to be incredibly happy if they did something like that, and then they would end up probably having a closer relationship with the fan base, and it would most likely work out a lot better in the end for it. Do let me know what you guys think about this in the comments below. Do you also agree that more games actually need more Q&A testing in them? Would you also like to see the CTE thing from Battlefield being introduced into other games? That way you actually can play the update early and really get feedback on stuff instead of actually playing something like the update a week before it does end up coming out. Then you're actually not going to be able to test a few things if there is something that's broken in there. We all do know once again that many updates tend to break games in a certain way, so like whenever a new update comes out, you're probably going to find something else that is broken. I do think having a test environment like this could fix something like that. Then if you're also having issues in the servers, why not have more open betas for it? Because, well, it really isn't going to hurt anything. Then again, though, if you look at the other side of it, you're probably going to see something like closed betas only being tied to pre-orders, which right there alone is probably going to have a lower player count because, well, you kind of have to buy the game first to even try it out. I think that's kind of broken. Do let me know what you guys think about this in the comments below.